Welcome to Kelowna Now Live. I'm here with Mayor Tom Dyas, and today we're going to talk about the purchase of the Trustwell property. What's the address of that property again?
3896 Truswell Road.
It's been in the news. Maybe just give us a bit of a rundown on that purchase.
I think the big thing initially is to thank the Truswell family. This was a discussion that was had over 20 years ago with Bud Truswell, and it was their desire to look at allocating this particular piece of land as parkland for the city. But they did not.
And you can see it there on the screen.
Yeah, and they did not want to look at the transfer of it until sometime into the future. And just this last year, Bud passed away. And then there was discussions, I believe, about 2 years ago, knowing that how his health was going, and his wife and children then decided that they would like to continue with his wish to look at transferring this property so that it was accessible and usable by all within the community. And so those discussions started, and we wanted to be certain that for the family that whatever value was set on this property, that it was fair to them as what the value of the property would be, but also what the potential development value of that property would be. So it was a combination of both from a third party.
That's near where the new Aqua development is as well, right?
Correct. It's the new Aqua development, not far off of where the El Dorado is, and a key component to that is along the Mission Trail. Yeah. Because now, eventually, this will completely connect up with the Mission Trail, so you'll be able to ride your bike down to the Mission Trail and get right down to the water.
Yeah, we did a story, I'd say like 10 years ago in Kelowna now, where our biggest wish for the city was to do the ring trail all the way around, like connect, which is, you're doing a lot of it now, because it's like, if you connect the Mission Creek Greenway, the Greenway goes all the way into Rutland. I don't know if you can pull up some of those shots of Rutland, but you go all the way up into Rutland to the Regional District Park, and then you just need that small piece from Springfield to the rail trail.
And what has been being worked on, and as a community request, I mean, over into the years, there's been a lot of requests. Could we not have better access to the waterfront?
You can see there, you can see the Mission Creek Regional Park, and then you can kind of see, does that one show the rail trail? I don't know if that one's showing the rail trail.
It is the rail trail that comes down, or not the rail trail, that's the Greenway.
That's the Greenway. I think there's another shot there that has the...
And so the idea that the city is looking at trying to purchase property along the water, sever the waterfront, and then look at selling the property back. So there is the selling the property back to the individual who's interested in buying it, so that there would be that connectivity that we would be able to eventually get to the point where we can just walk along the waterfront. But it takes a little bit of time in order for that to be accomplished. But this is an example. This conversation, I believe, started about 20 or 25 years ago.
Because right now you can go from Waterfront Park all the way down to Mill Creek. That's all city property now, right?
Yes.
So that's all opened up. And then I know that there's just personally, I know there's a few houses that were bought in the by the hospital there, where they sectioned off a piece of that and then sold the properties back to individuals. And then from from Rotary Park or Gyro?
Well, there's Gyro to Boyce.
Gyro to Boyce.
And so and to Rotary. Gyro to Rotary. There's areas in there that homes have been purchased and there's been severed and sell. So the idea that you can come down the Mission Greenway down to this park eventually, and then go right along the waterfront into Gyro, and then all the way, going through Rotary and right into all the way along the watershore.
Eventually, if it ever gets all done and looped up, that'll be an amazing piece for Kelowna, right? Especially for our lifestyle kind of area.
It is, and even this, and I know that it may be a little bit out there a ways, but there was also discussion about, well, when you get to Trustwell Park and you're looking at the area in Trustwell, would there ever be an opportunity to look at potentially bridging that? As some of the bridges that are a little bit further upstream towards Rutland, would there be the opportunity so that you could come out onto Bluebird and then connect to Bluebird and then go along Bluebird and into Bluebird Beach area? And then next year, we're looking at doing a little bit more of a safer route along Lakeshore, which can then put you right into Hobson.
Oh, wow. So some of the, I guess, negative press that came out on this was because the BC assessment value, which anybody can look up, you can look up any property you want online. You can just go to BC assessment, plug in the address, and you're going to get a assessed value at that time. And obviously, you paid more than assessed value because you're paying market value. People don't buy properties at assessed value. Usually, there's a big difference sometimes, and sometimes there's a small difference. Sometimes below or above. And this property came in quite a bit higher. What was the final price on this?
Well, it was 18 million for this property, but I think there's a couple of points in there that are really important to just note. One of the things with BC assessment is a property will be assessed through BC assessment, and each year it will receive a CPI index so that there'll be an increase. But unless there is an actual change within that property, and it's one of the things that we've always dealt with or trying to deal with BC assessment, because we receive a lower tax amount on the property. Unless there's a change, a sale, or somebody buying it, there isn't a reevaluation of that property.
And that's meant really to protect the homeowner sometimes too, right? Because say somebody like, that's an older home on that property.
Yes.
And then to say that, oh, just because, I mean, when they bought that property, are they the original owners of that property?
1940.
1940.
And his dad, actually, Bud's dad.
Do we know what that it was probably like in the $100,000 range or something like that. An expensive property at the time. But what that is in there is to protect people for saying, like they're paying property taxes, and all of a sudden, the property goes from, what they paid for it to $8 million, and they're paying tax on $8 million. Some people would, start screaming that they're stealing their property through taxation, right? So,
and you're correct. I mean, this is something that BC assessment doesn't do. But then when we look at this particular scenario and we have an evaluation of $5 or $6 million, and then it's 3 times the property. But I think if we would have had it appraised a year ago, that valuation would have been substantially higher than. Yeah,
I would agree there.
And so what I also looked at is properties in the area. There's a hotel site which is just above this particular piece of property. It is for
older hotel, right?
Yeah, it is for sale for $12 million, but the land on it is 0.9 of an acre because there's an easement that comes back.
It's not in the front of the water either.
It's not on the water. It's $12 million, and the area is 0.9 of an acre. Yeah. Just to follow through on that, if you look across Mission Creek at the BC assessed on that, it's 0.5 of an acre, and it's $5 million. Yeah. This is actually 1.8 acres of land and potentially 2 acres of sand during the summertime.
And it'll get bigger.
So there's a substantial difference with regards to the sizing of the properties.
And I think, this just is my perspective on it. I think that it really fits the need for the city to kind of like build a park because it's on the right side of the creek for one, because that's how you're going to connect the greenway instead of having to build a bridge across it. It's on the right side of the greenway so that you can connect, because the aqua development will be open to the public along the waterfront as well.
Yes.
And that's an amazing property, that aqua development. So that the aqua development alone would have added value to this property no matter how you looked at it, right?
Yes. We looked at potentially if this property
if you just freeze on there, Nick, can you go back and just freeze on that previous frame? And if we look at that image there, and so on the right side of Mission Creek there, that's the property there with the little house tucked in the corner there.
Yes, right? Yes.
And then if we look over to the right, that's where that aqua development is kind of going, like further right, I think. Right.
Well, Mission Shores is right beside it, and there was an opportunity for potentially them to look at stretching out their area, so then it would have become more of a, there would have been potentially six or seven condo developments in there, and that was a possibility, but that's not what the family wanted.
Can you pull up an image, Nick, that shows the Mission Creek Bridge itself? Just that might be the Google map one, the Google Earth one.
And the other piece of this property, which is just beautiful, is the trees that they initially planted on it. So again, during those hot summer days, not only is there access to the water with the beach that is there, but also access to an area that's substantially shaded.
So I guess you paid $18 million for it, and you use a third-party evaluation to figure out that number so that it's independent. Is money set aside for this, like for these purchases? Like it's already kind of said, this is how we're going to grow our parks. And
yes,
so this is one of the target parks.
This is one of the target parks. There is an allocation put aside each year to look at opportunities that come along to acquire pieces of property like this, and then also to go back to that buy, sever, and sell. So if there are other pieces of property that come available along the waterfront,
Right.
something that can be purchased, acquire the lakefront area, and then look at selling the property
And
back.
I think lots of times in those, you're not doing that badly in that transaction either, and getting that front piece, right? So,
Well, there isn't. It's not that bad, but it's also community. It's also what the community has asked for numerous times over the years, to look at providing access to the waterfront.
isn't it the odd thing though? I think is Penticton kind of did it better than Kelowna did back in the, you know what I mean? Because a lot of Penticton waterfront was never sold, right? So if you look at their the Okanagan Lakeside, that's all kind of open beachfront. Whereas, the houses are set back onto the other side of the street. And then if you look at their Skaha side, it's similar, right? So.
And it's interesting because a lot of times if you speak to individuals who've been around here for many, many years, nobody really, 100 years ago wanted to live down by the water, simply because it was a flood area. But it's only been with, developments and the ability to deal with the drainage on some of those floods that the houses have taken place. So that would have potentially been the time to say, okay, all of this area along Lakeshore is just dedicated to parkland. But now that, as you know, that ship has kind of sailed. So what we need to do is slowly look at trying to bring it back. And that's the process.
So the hard part's done. Purchase the property.
Yes.
Now plans.
I would be.
And then how long before people can actually start enjoying the property? This summer. Wow.
This summer. There's a few things that has to be done on the property. But I think that's another item which is extremely nice about this particular property. The family kept very good care of the property. There's a few items that we have to do from a safety standpoint, but it will be accessible to the public.
How will the public access it? Through their driveway kind of thing, or how will they get into that park right now?
There will be a small parking area, and that would be, something that we looked at. But the hope is a lot of the traffic may come right down the Mission Trail. Right. A lot of the traffic could maybe look at parking at CNC, for example.
Oh yeah, that's not that far, right?
It's less than a kilometer, or it's about a half a kilometer walk, or a little bit more than a half a kilometer walk down the trail. And then you're ending up in the park and can walk back from there.
So how connected is the Mission Creek Greenway at the bridge there? Doesn't it end there? Or?
It ends right on the side of the bridge, and that's where that other property, which is that hotel site, right. Once it looks at selling, and it is up for sale now, as I had mentioned.
Can you pull that up again, Nick?
It is up for sale now. It did have an offer on it for $12 million.
That's an old motel too.
Yes.
And I think a lot of monthly rentals in there. I think.
It is. It's about $2,000 a month to rent in that, and I believe the revenue that comes off of it on an annual basis.
Maybe one of the aerials from the video
is around $400,000. So it isn't a property that somebody would buy at that amount and keep. It's probably something that would be potentially looked at redeveloped.
So you could stop it right there, actually, Nick.
But that area, so when we look at that picture, which shows it perfectly, the area in red, those 3 dots in red, just on the other, that is the final piece.
Oh, okay.
So when that property looks at being sold, then we would sever off that piece, and it would be connected from there.
Even if a developer buys it, you could probably then ask for that piece.
Oh no, when they're buying it, they'll know that it's severed off.
So it's already taken.
It's already there.
So what's the red piece there on the?
Those are the other 3 existing homes that are in existence in between Mission Shores and the Eldorado.
And those are future purchase kind of things, or
there are considerations that if that was to eventually, like we've just done with this one, eventually that opens up, then that connectivity is there all the way up to Rotary.
Is there an option to actually just build out past their properties to kind of go around them too?
I think there's an option to walk in the water around them. Whether or not there's an option to.
But I'm just saying that the city was to build like a wall out there or something.
You know what? I'm not 100% certain. That would obviously involve the province, because now we're dealing with the province and the access to the water. But I think that the plan is to look at. Understanding that we'd like to look at extending that walkway, and slowly over a period of time, like this is taken, eventually it'll get there.
So no name for the park yet. That'll come.
No name.
And then like a plan of what it's going to look like? Is that available yet?
No, it's not. And I think what and this is probably a great point to make, because when we look at something like Bluebird, which is on Lakeshore, or if we look at this one, the acquiring of the property and the acquisition of the property is extremely, extremely important. So when that opportunity comes up, you really can't let it pass. And that's exactly what this was. The ability to look at getting the park into where it looks like the one on Cedar, or other parks around town, or what we're doing with the Hart Park right now on the corner of Gordon and DeHart. That is a planning which comes about down the road, but we at least know that we have the ability of securing the land. The land is secured, and then you can build the structure around it afterwards.
Right. The house, plans for the house at all, or is that going to stay, do you think?
They're in discussion right now with regards to...
Because it's an older home.
It is an older home. I'm not certain on how that would look. There is discussion that, it's obviously to the family. That's extremely important. That was the house that they grew up in, and they've been around for a long time, but there are potentially safety concerns.
No plans to rent it out. Like, I know the city buys some houses and rents them out. I was going to put my name in.
No plans to rent it out.
I know that the city buys some homes and rents them out because of future development, stuff like that. Right?
And that's a perfect example of that, buy, sever, and sell. I mean, there are situations where they've bought homes.
Rutland Transit area and stuff like that too, right? So,
yes.
Lots of
those type of corridors, so that we can, when we're looking at doing the plans for the future, we have access to those areas.
I imagine there'll be some recognition for the Trustwell family for, selling the property to the city. Again, properties like Stewart Park and that stuff, like it's tough to acquire those kind of like key properties too, right?
And it goes back to what I had said originally, that we're just so grateful that the family looked at it, was dedicated as parkland in the OCP, that if a developer would have bought this particular property and then came back in front of council trying to change the designation on it, it might have been a little bit tough to look at changing the designation on that. So this is good that they it was their wishes that they wanted to kind of look at proceeding this way.
It's a pretty busy area now though too, right? El Dorado down there, which is my iconic hotel of Kelowna, and their waterfront restaurant is beautiful. And then Aqua, I mean, the development looks outstanding.
And then Aqua, I believe, if I understand, I know that they're looking at doing some type of hospitality element in the front of their building also. Yeah. And then there's the retail, which runs along the side. And this area, call it Secret. Some people call it Secret Beach. Some people call it Skimmers Beach. Yeah. I remember taking my kids down there 20 some odd years ago on little skim boards, and they just.
I used to park my boat there. I had a small boat, and we would actually beach it because there's so much sand there, right? Because there's so much sand, so it's easy just to run the boat up onto the sand. And then get out the dog and play and stuff like that.
And I think you'll see now it's a community beach.
Yeah, pretty shallow in there too. You got to be really careful.
There may be some regulations around kind of the boats coming in tight with a lot of people swimming in there, but
very shallow in that area for sure. Because that is where Mission Creek. That's the outlet for Mission Creek, the largest stream that flows into Okanagan Lake, and with it in runoff comes a lot of sediment. Right, so that's why that if you look at from above, we did some aerial photos. I don't have them here right now, but we did share all those with the City of Kelowna. We did that flood back when Mill Creek spilled and Mission Creek looked like it was going to spill. You could see like way out there that how far that plume is from Mission Creek, right? From the mouth of Mission Creek, right?
And I think we experience that every year when they're looking at dredging the boat, the boat launch there, and the amount of, in order to get the depth so that boats can launch in that particular area.
I like what Aqua did too with that boat valet thing, and they had oversubscribed, I guess, on what they just had a parking lot, but now with their stack and store kind of thing, it keeps a lot of boats out of the water, which is great, right, for safety of the boat and like safety of the lake as well too, right, in a storm and stuff like that. But and also gets more people to access the lake, right?
Yeah, and they're starting to lease out some of those properties along the front. I see an ice cream and a coffee shop going in there, so there'll be more people.
That whole corridor is kind of like really developing. You got Moval and Caban and Aqua, and there's been a bunch that have been done prior to, right? So
it's it is a good news story. The the acquiring and the acquisition of this park, it is a great news story. I know there's concerns, or there was concerns with regards to the value, but as I go back, this is a good example of an area that was dedicated as potential park within the OCP. And in the process of looking at acquiring the property, the city wanted to make sure that the family and the individual who was selling the property was treated fairly. They were treated fairly from a standpoint of what the potential use on that property would have been if it was developed and a developer purchased it, but also in the negotiation through a third-party appraisal that it was appraised fairly.
So when it was first announced, there was obviously a little bit of like, I guess, media attention to it.
And I think I need to probably look at going back and apologizing in that process, because the process that should have happened with it, and there was a couple of media outlets, not yourself, but there was a couple of other ones that were concerned a little bit about it, is the process that should have happened is the media release should have been done so that it documented all the information. And then the city wanted to celebrate this with a little bit of a video outlining exactly what you've seen here with the areas that, that it would cover. So it gave a very good description of what we were looking at. Regrettably, the video went out first, and then the media release went out after.
So the cat got out of the bag.
Yeah, and that was just, again, it should have went the other way, and we'll make certain that it goes the other way, because we're not trying to get ahead of any type of release.
I mean, all that information would have been public at some point, whether or not it
was just within 24
day
hours.
Day 2, right? Do you know what I mean? Like that's because you can't really hide that stuff, right?
No, it was all within 24 hours. It was just one potentially should have happened.
I mean, it's a big thing, and we've seen it with Parkinson Rec Center. We've seen a lot of people very motivated to try and. I mean, I've done some live streams with people that were very motivated against it to stop the process. I don't know if they were against Parkinson Rec so much other than the process, but I mean, one of the things I said was like, I don't know, a lot of people were against H2O, but now they say it's the best thing ever. I think it is an investment to purchase properties like this that are for the enjoyment of residents for the next 1,000 years or whatever you want to say that is, right? Like 100 years, 200 years. And sometimes right now it looks expensive, but I bet you 50 years from now that looks cheap, right? $8 million.
Well, and the other item that was discussed and looked at was, if you're doing this, why aren't you putting these funds more towards homelessness, or why aren't you putting these funds more towards, traffic and infrastructure, things along those lines? And it's just to clarify that the portfolio that the city manages and that we're managing has many different compartments to it. And when we're looking at purchasing parkland, that's one of them. When we're looking at also making sure that there's transportation and roads built, that's another one, and there's an allocation there. When we're looking at adding RCMP officers and bylaw, there's an allocation in those particular areas. So it's to balance out the portfolio and not to basically focus on one specific area.
You're a juggler, really, right? Like you're running an orchestra, and it is an opportunity show up, and either you answer the door or you don't. Right, and those are the things for stuff like that. But
well, and it's a business like this business. I mean, you can't just put all of your eggs, let's say, in one particular basket. You need to make sure that there's a balanced approach to. So
when people pay DCCs, is some of that money going towards like the parks in the future?
There is DCCs are more towards what we're looking at, with regards to roads and sewers and infrastructure in that particular area. There is a dedicated recovery.
But they usually have to carve off a piece of parkland too and stuff like that, right?
In those areas.
Yeah.
But there's
so where's most of the money come from, I guess, then for park purchasing?
We have dedicated funding that comes through and establishes a reserve for acquisitions around parks. And then when that, whatever that amount is on an annual basis, if there's an opportunity to come, we look at, available, we look at.
So if somebody was to look through the 2024 budget, will they see some of those reserves and allocations and all that stuff? And I get lots of times the information's there. It's just trying to find it, right? Trying to dig through those reports and that.
Yeah, they see exactly what the reserves are, what what we set aside for it in all of those particular areas, right through to road developments, as I had mentioned, also safety, community safety. I know that you had a little bit of a discussion at one point in time and went through some of the items on the budget.
We did, yeah.
You had the book.
We had Ron in and we had Doug in as well, right?
Yeah,
we had both Doug in. And I thought it was good. It was good for the budget's well laid out.
It was very well laid out, and we were able to, it's probably the, changing gears a little bit. It'll be the, second lowest increase throughout the province. And with the items that we were able to bring forward, I was proud of Mr. Sass and Mr. Gilchrist and their teams to putting forward what they had.
Well, I thought, I mean, I'm an accountant, so I looked at it and it looked very like easy to read as opposed to sometimes you could look at that stuff and most people's eyes glass over and stuff like that. Like it was lots of visuals in there too that help people understand it better.
It was totally new the way that they put it together this year than what they've put it together before.
Right. Service-based budget,
and then even the existing counselors who have been around for previous budgets said that they were very comfortable with the process.
Yeah, it looked good. Population growth is one of the things that we see. Well, obviously we have more people, more parks, more everything. How is Kelowna doing with population growth? Like,
well, we're at about 157,000 right now. And the expectation is, and I know you've heard, and we've all heard the different reports with regards to the number of individuals who are suspected to come into our community and call this place home in the future. And so, it's continuing to grow as one of the fastest growing communities.
Yeah, I mean, one of the good things that we've mentioned, because we do the news every morning now, my own plug now, 9 a.m. and 4 p.m., as we see rental property approvals, right? So I imagine if interest rates come down, we'll see a lot of shovels in the ground, right? So I think...
Yeah, right now there is 3,300 approvals for building developments.
Those units that are out there?
3,300 approvals.
Oh, projects. Oh, okay,
projects.
well, yeah.
So there is the ability for, when you're looking at projects in different forms, and all of them this council this last year approved over 2,200 units to advance. Yeah. So, but the concern is that we've only had about 1,150 occupancy permits. Right. So the spread in between what the development permits are as opposed to the occupancy permits.
I would think interest rates would have a lot to do with that.
I would think so. I mean, and it may be that a company has a particular development that they're trying to build within Kelowna, but they may have another development they're building somewhere else, and because of interest rates or the uptake on finalizing those properties.
But we are seeing a lot more lately anyway, rental projects as opposed to owner projects, right? Yeah. So
and it is
there's that incentive obviously that's helped, right? So,
it's the incentive that has helped with regards to us looking at the tax incentive for them, so that trying to initiate to bring more rental properties online or purpose built for ownership.
We want to kind of stick with Trustwell, though. Is there anything that I've kind of missed in Trustwell?
No, I think we've covered it off. I mean, I think what we wanted to just it's good to understand the valuation on it, that this particular area is 1.8 acres. It has the potential to have another 2 acres of sand. When we look at it in comparisons to some of the other properties that are there that are for sale, especially the one just across up the street, which is 12 million and it's 0.9 of an acre, and across is 0.5 of an acre for about 5 million. It gives, and that BC assessment doesn't always update their figures unless it ends up being there's a change of property,
change of ownership, something like that. Yeah.
So the value on this and the connectivity coming down the Mission Trail and bringing it along, it was I found it to be a very exciting purchase. And like I said, I mean, I'm very grateful that the Truswell family was in agreement that is dedicated as parkland. And if we're able somewhere in the future to look at expanding it so that there's a bridge which runs across and it connects to other properties, Bluebird Beach and right along Lakeshore, down to Hobson, it just extends that whole walkway further.
Well, thank you, Tom, for coming in, and thank you for watching.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.